want to start off talking about?
I mean, I think at least on the forefront of my mind
Sure.
is where EVs are fitting into
Wow.
the enthusiast
That's
future.
loaded.
Like that's what everybody's talking about right now, and it's so divisive. Like you go on social media platforms, you go on any kind of chat group, and you get the pro EV folks, and then the people that are just completely against it and won't even try it.
Yeah.
So
Like
where
the trucks.
and then where does that leave folks like us who love cars?
I know. I think I'm having personal experience with this XM, which I am unfortunately thoroughly disappointed in.
Why are you disappointed? I'm just curious.
Look, I got to give it to you that they're doing the 1,200 mile service because I didn't want to give it to you before then because I'm hoping maybe
fair.
at that point you'll even get. It gave me all the power because it's predetermined. Only 80% of the power is given to you until you go to 300 miles, and then at 1,200 miles, all the M settings are then unlocked. So it's like 110 miles away from 1,200 miles, so that you can experience. I just think it's confused. I just don't think it knows what it wants to be. From a physical standpoint, you look at it, it's a truck, but then there's no trunk. Because we've got all these partitions that are attached to the hatch. You can't put anything in there. And you'll laugh because I've got a power washer in the trunk of it right now.
So it is kind of a truck.
It is kind of a truck. I do have a
a
power washer in the trunk. But everything else, then you get into it. It's got these cool effects. The sun, no sunroof. It's got the roof that has these M lights that run, and there's all this sound, and it's cool when you get in it. But there's no life after that. Like you're expecting this thing, and I guess the thing for me is if I see two stacked quad exhausts in the back of a car, I'm expecting something to happen when I press a red button on the center console.
Not just the chime.
Nothing happens. Nothing happens. Exactly. It goes, and then you see the red and blue and purple running across the ceiling. So I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, if you leave it in sport and you press that start button,
It defaults back.
it
every
defaults
time.
back every time, and there's
Regardless.
no way of hearing the engine come to life when you
No different than being in sport mode in any of our other cars. Every time you start, it defaults back to that.
But you can
I'm
click
sure
it
there's.
on a button,
What's that?
the M buttons,
You can, but
and then just click it each time and then press.
But
that's a step.
right, you still have to. So what I do is I get into it, I start it, I goose the throttle 3/4 of the way, and then the engine barks, and then there we go. But it should, I don't know.
It's slack in the theater.
So I think to answer the question, at least from my perspective, I think there's an opportunity to still make cars that could be electric, could be hybrid, but we need to define what goes first. And I don't know if anyone's figured out, at least with that car, what's first. Is it the internal combustion engine or is it electric? And it's set up where it's both, but I think it's just not operating the way it should be from when you originally approach it, like, okay, this thing should rumble, and there's no rumble.
There's no rumble.
Do you agree? Or do you
I
disagree?
agree. And then once
Yeah.
you run out of the charge, you don't get the full horsepower ratings because it's including with the
Yeah, because
fully
it's
charged.
644
fully charged.
fully charged, right? Which is good for about 30 miles. When you lose the power of the battery,
And
you
it
drop
shows.
to I think 5 and change because it's 100 and something horsepower.
Yeah.
That's significant.
Yeah. But I think the bigger question is, is the future going to be a hybrid vehicle like that, where you have a combination of batteries and combustion motor, or are we just really going to make that full transition to all EV?
I think near term, for our brand at least, there's a lot of push towards making sure we have 2 versions. But I think they're realizing long term, there is going to be both. They are going to have to coexist because people are not ready for a full-on performance EV. Take case in point, Tesla, the Model S Plaid. How many of those do they sell? If we look at registration data, I don't think anyone says, hey, I really want a Tesla that's gonna go 2.2 seconds with a yoke steering wheel. It's cool,
Yeah.
but I don't think anybody signs up for that, and I don't think for our brand, how many people are gonna knock on the door? You guys know better than anyone. Who's saying, hey, I heard you guys are gonna be having, I saw that test mule, that's the M3, and then all electric. Can't wait to get one. Where can I leave a deposit?
Right.
Have you been asked? I haven't.
They all ask about the touring.
Yeah.
That's all.
And
they
the
want.
touring is going to be a hybrid from what we hear.
Yeah.
So, But you're right. I mean, there has been very little demand, at least from the enthusiast contingent, for a enthusiast-focused EV. But I'm also wondering, is it just because like nobody's really gone all in yet on an EV sports car? Like, nobody has the equivalent right now of, a Z4 EV or a BRZ EV or something that's small, lightweight, has 2 seats. Because if you look at the EV landscape right now, they're all behemoths. They all weigh 5,000 plus pounds. They're not sports cars.
Right. But the battery tech to that end will catch up at some point. Smaller batteries, more power, quicker charging. I think maybe then there becomes more of an opportunity where you could have some of these small, because it's a conundrum to have a small car that you're gonna have to strap on a 1,500 pound battery. Next thing you know, it's 4,000 pounds. The car should weigh 3, right? So until battery technology really advances in terms of its size and weight and ability to produce energy, I don't know if we're gonna see a car like that in the short term. It's gonna be a little while. I mean, the batteries are coming for sure. I mean, we're talking 30% better within the next, just from us going to the 2025 NUA class. That's significant. And then there's another 30 coming right behind that within 2 years.
Solid state batteries, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
I think when that happens, smaller, lighter weight, higher energy, then 100% you could have something like that. That's fun. I just don't know how we do it right now.
Yeah.
You can mask a lot of the weight, which we've done a pretty good job, at least in our cars. Like, that XM is hefty. I think that thing's pushing close to 6,000 pounds.
I think it's more.
Is it?
Yeah, I think it's 65.
I think it's like, I thought it was like 59 and change, and then late in it goes, I mean, you can't go over certain trestle bridges going over the Delaware. It's the truth. There's a bridge like down in towards the Delaware Water Gap. You can't go over. It says 6,000 pounds. That car laden isn't allowed to go over that bridge.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
It's the truth.
Right.
But it masks
Really
it pretty well. It does handle pretty well for something that size, but there's no denying it. There are moments where you're like, whoa, you're carrying.
It's hefty.
It is.
And there's no spare tire.
No.
No run flats.
No. So I would love to see something that would give the opportunity to both. I think there's a place to have gas, the gas part of it becoming more on the back burner if we can get lighter and then make it fun, because there's no denying, I mean, it is something cool about getting in these things, and acceleration's instantaneous.
The torque is addictive.
Yeah.
And we all love to drive torque, at least in this country.
100%.
But I think, assuming that battery technology advances, and it will,
Sure.
and we're gonna go down that path of smaller, lighter batteries, smaller, lighter vehicles, and somebody can, like BMW, can make a sports car. I mean, the other part of the equation is like, you're missing a significant part of the driving experience, which is now sound and any sort of perceptible shift with a transmission. I mean, how do you...
It's funny you mention that though, because they're talking about that. Dodge has the new
I saw that.
Hellcat,
Yeah.
right?
Well, yeah, so they're gonna use something...
Or whatever they're calling it, I don't even know.
I think it's the E-Charger.
Is
Is
that
what
what
they
they're calling it?
what they
Okay.
settled on. And they're using something called vibro acoustics in that car. So it's a combination of active vibration enhancement, the acronym AVE.
Yeah.
Basically a
And-
giant subwoofer under the car.
We did
Well,
that, by the way.
It uses a force generator to enact vibrations on specific points of
In
the
the
chassis, so that you feel that rumbling of a
To
V8 through the seat.
synthesize that.
Yeah. And
Well, we did that long ago, to throw it in there, Z4. There were these air bladder baffles that were built into the firewall that opened and reverberated engine note and sound into the car. Not a lot of people remember that, but we did a version of that, not electronically, but mechanically, to bring more sound into the car and give you that front engine, roadster, old kind of feel. That was going back into the early 2000s. But that, I mean, have you heard it yet? Does it sound, does it feel?
I mean, I haven't felt it. I've heard videos of it. It sounds a bit digital still.
Really?
Yeah.
Sounds like a digital.
Yeah,
They're
it's
doing
not-
that with Hyundai. Hyundai just came out with like a Kona N electric.
I
There's,
heard
like,
about
Ioniq.
Ioniq 5 N version.
Yeah,
You
and it's-
talked about
it's like
that. Didn't you
$100,000.
mention it's like it's got some crazy stats on it?
Yeah, I mean, look, the stats on it are pretty ridiculous. You know, quarter mile times. Supposedly Hyundai put real effort into the chassis, so it's a good handling car as
Well,
well.
they took a lot of our guys.
But, you got Albert Bierman there now,
Yeah.
right, heading up the N division,
Right.
which is unfortunate. But it's supposed to be a really great driving car. Now I've heard videos of how that thing sounds, and again, it's very video game-ish.
And you can
Oh,
change.
really?
You can
Yeah.
change the sounds. Like you can have it rev. You can have it make shift point sounds and all that.
The question there though is like, do the younger generations care for what you might be looking for?
That's just
And
it.
do they not care, Alan's generation, about that?
And I think it's one of those things, like, you don't know what you don't have. So if you're growing up in a world without internal combustion engines and you're just not used to that, and your world is, basically, PlayStation and Xbox and video games, you're probably okay with the digital
Right.
sounds, because that's what you know.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's like, great, I can bring the video game to my car, that's fantastic. But for, I don't know, at least for me, like, I'm on the real thing.
Prideful moment yesterday, because I have to mention it, because it's still part of this topic. Last night I brought home a 3 Series because the XM wipers didn't work. So I pull in the driveway, my almost 5-year-old son looks out the window and goes, "Dad, what are you driving?" I said, nothing crazy, 3 Series. He goes, "All right, I want to go out there." We go inside the car, he wants to turn it on. First thing he goes, "Oh, it's got the paddle shifters." I said, "Yeah." So we get done, we're getting ready to leave. He goes, "Can you open up the hood? I want to see the engine." And I looked at him, I go, he's probably the last one that'll ever ask to see that.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
won't even care. And when I opened the hood, he goes, "Whoa, this thing's huge." And I'm saying to myself, how many people, even now, forget about age, would even look on, I mean, you do deliveries. Do you even show anyone under the engine bay?
Sometimes I only show them if I'm doing a test drive and they're in the process of buying the car, and I show them why BMW is better, because I show
Wow.
the symmetry of it, the balance of it, and how the engineers designed it, so it still drops down in an accident, so it
Sure.
doesn't go into the cabin. So that's some things I tell people, and they're like,
But
"Oh,
not
wow,
on
I didn't know
delivery,
that."
right?
Delivery, no, when they open it up, and then I'll talk about
I
it.
mean,
but
what do they, what, I mean, I used to do deliveries, and every delivery, I would open up the hood because I wanted to
yeah,
show them.
I show them how to do
the
it.
jump starting points in the engine bay.
Yeah, the 2 points.
And not for them to remember to point out to the roadside guy when they come out, because he's not gonna know, because he just jump started a Hyundai.
The
and then he's
battery's
gonna
in the front.
Right, so everything's changed. But as much as we wanna maybe see that, some of the guys looking at that car specifically would love to still feel that and know that. I don't know if everybody else really, as time goes on,
And I think
outside of us, really cares.
Yeah, you might be
Which is
right,
sad.
but you also bring up a good point about car culture, and there's some terrible things about it, right?
Sure.
But I mean, I think what I see anyway, you go to like the historic Concours event in Lime Rock,
Right.
you go to most Cars and Coffees on a Sunday, and there's a pretty big youth population there. I'm talking about younger kids that come with their parents, and they still want to hear the cars start up. They still want to look at the engines. So if that is perpetuated,
Sure.
I think it can stay alive for generations to come.
So I'll give you an example that was posed to me recently. This exact conversation happened with a florist recently that I stopped in to see, and he's a car guy, so we're talking about cars. He's talking about his grandkids, similarly to what I'm talking about with my son, and interest in cars and so on and so forth. And then we start talking about values of some of the older cars. We start talking about the older Challenger, with the money that those things are still commanding at the moment, which are insane. You look at Barrett, you look at any of these auctions, I mean, these things are going for crazy money. And he brought up a good point. He goes, and the truth of the matter is, when you really look at what those cars are, they're garbage.
Oh,
They can't
Yeah.
handle. They don't drive. The steering's numb. They don't stop. It's nostalgia. That's what's driving value. And what he said to me was, he goes, and I said, look, I don't know where it goes. I don't know what values are like, but I brought up the topic about cars from the 80s and 90s and the commanding prices that they've got at the moment, and probably will only increase. And he says, yeah, but that'll end too. And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, look at it from this. How many guys are looking for 1930s hot rod Model
Exactly.
Ts? Those things are junk. Nobody cares anymore.
It's gone.
There's a point where the generation moves on,
yeah.
and the wealth and the interest in those cars prior, that shifts. And so he goes, the 70s will, the value in those cars will continue for some time, but then there'll be a point of diminishing returns, and those guys will move on. I'm not mentioning value more so than the fact that there's a shift in that car culture, and at some point we become the minority.
Yeah.
And the majority is going to be all these people now, which, look, let's call it for what it is. America has car culture and will always have car culture. We're a big country. We're never going to build enough railroads. We are not building hyperloops. We're not going to move around all of a sudden in flying planes. We're going to be driving for probably the next 100 years, if not more. So car culture is here to stay, but I think the car culture will shift dramatically soon.
And what is that future point in time when we become the minority? Like, is that 10 years from now? Is it 30 years from now?
I think we have to follow the manufacturers, and I think the reality is there's been some change. This past year was a big shift in a lot of manufacturers realizing that we're not putting all our eggs in that basket with EV. We need to diversify, we need to have that. But regulations are pointing towards, let's use what we've got with state and local government. 2035, we're not legally allowed to sell an internal combustion engine in the state of New Jersey.
Maybe.
That's not that far away.
Right.
Absolutely not.
I mean, the politicians that created these regulations won't be in office. So.
No, but there's enough that was done that protects these laws, that to unwind this would be a tremendous effort and incredibly unlikely. Because a lot of the money that was given out throughout this period was contingent upon these things being, these prerequisites and timelines being met. And if that doesn't happen, then they unfulfill a lot of the taxpayer dollars that have already been shelled out. Because taxpayer dollars were utilized to say, you're gonna live longer, but you're gonna pay to make that happen. That not happening, we've got a problem. So I think we're gonna be, I think 10 years, I think we see a pretty significant shift. And it's forced.
It's forced. Will manufacturers be able to find a way to stay profitable with EVs without, putting on these huge incentives and rebates? Right?
Tesla did.
Yeah, but they're not out of the woods yet.
No, they're not, but they figured out a way, and I think with their next phase of being able to cast a lot of these components for the body of the vehicles, that happening, the scalability, the cost, the time, all that changes.
They just said they're done with gigacasting. They're not doing it anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
That was like a thing.
It was a huge thing. I mean, Elon kind of like promoted the whole company on that basis. And just last week, yeah, it's gone. Along with all the other cuts that he's making.
Huh.
Wow. Well, that changes things.
It
Because a
does.
lot of people were supposedly following suit.
Yeah, and I think, you look at the landscape
that.
of EV manufacturers in China right now, heavily subsidized by the government.
Oh yeah, they're paying to make
And
those cars
how
$25,000.
how does anybody compete with that?
I don't think you can. I think, and that's what scares me. So going back to car culture and then bringing to the point that you have now, my fears with these newer generations is that they don't care what logo is on the hood or on the back or on the door sill when they open it. They want a mode of transportation, and they want it to be as inexpensive as possible. The thought that during COVID everyone said, you know what, it's gonna be the death of owning a car because everyone's gonna Uber and everyone, that didn't happen. On the contrary, we're coming out of the tail end of that, of COVID, and now our SAR for the United States is gonna be close to 17 million, which was almost what we were at prior, climbing towards 18 very soon. So people want cars, people want transportation, but to your point, I don't know if car culture, the way we know it at the moment, survives, considering there's going to be these opportunities with very inexpensive electric cars. I don't know if Cars and Coffee is gonna exist with a bunch of guys standing by BYDs.
Exactly. and is anybody going to care if this, if every single battery component is sourced from the same?
What do you talk
two or
about
three-
at that point? Like, what do you? Everyone's in a parking lot. Like, hey, dude, how much charge do you have? What do you mean? Did you hack it to get it to be faster? Like, what do you talk about?
Right. Well, hey, I'm staying at a 90% peak charge rate, even though I'm using, 80% of
I changed my instrument cluster that now looks like the gauge from a 1960s Mustang or something like that.
That's where it's going to be at. I mean, not to put you on the spot, Alan, but what's your generation's perspective?
My
on all this?
generation's perspective.
Yeah.
They still like cars. I mean, I guess at my age, I grew up having cars with internal combustion engine, but I also see like the evolution of cars, the tech, EVs. Like I see it start up. And
Right.
when Teslas first came out, I thought that was the coolest thing ever. I was like, I want a Tesla because.
How old were you when, we're not gonna give your age away, but how old were you when Tesla, well, some of them back into that.
Oh, I don't even remember.
What grade were you in? You don't have to give an age.
Middle school maybe.
Okay.
6th grade.
Yeah, this is when the Roadster came out.
The original,
The original
it was the
one.
Lotus adaptation to
Yes,
the, right,
yeah,
right, right.
that one.
Yeah.
I thought that was the coolest car ever because it was electric, and I related to an RC car at the time.
What was the range on that? Do you remember, Mike?
On which one?
On the Tesla, the original Roadster.
Oh, on the road. I think it was like 200 miles.
I think it was
Really?
200 miles. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
decent.
it was but based on every other EV that had preceded it, it was fantastic,
Wow.
Yeah.
right? Because what was the original GM EV back in like the late 90s, early 2000s? I think it had a range of 90 miles.
I remember the EV Bolt.
Which, considering that's not bad, when our first true electric with the i3 from BMW came out, 80 miles was max. 80. And that's on a warm day with a tailwind and everything else.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it's crazy.
So your car, you still have car culture within you then?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you're
Like
sitting-
I'm sitting here, but I love like the sound of an engine, the way it feels, like when you drive it,
right.
like just downshifting before a curve. You can't do that with an EV.
You know,
Like what I experienced when I was driving back here with the i4, I had to take back the i4 M50. It's instant torque and some power, but you like on the highway when you want to just go, it feels different.
yeah.
There's like a momentum loss instead of like the initial like stepping on it, you feel it, but when you're on the highway and you push it, you don't really feel it that much.
You know, though, they are working on a lot of that, though, that you just mentioned. They're going to get these EV transmissions to give you downshifts, to give you sensing, and that's happening even with our so some of the tech coming to our car, not to steer off, but with the newer class, with this new ability with them to get a lot of the information transferred amongst modules almost instantaneously, there are going to be opportunities to develop and introduce things to a driver of an EV that prior wouldn't be able to exist. The sensation of a downshift when you do
Like
that
a
paddle, it's not doing anything, but it does something to the car. It'll apply a brake on the car to give you that inertia, a sound, all that can and all that would never be possible because ABS doing that, steering angle sense, all those things couldn't talk fast enough. That will happen now. That's going to be there. So I think you got to look at us as a brand to be at the forefront with some of the stuff, and I'd be very surprised that this next class of cars with EV, we can't count out some of the stuff that will come from M. I think it's going to surprise some people.
That's great. Actually, great to hear.
Yeah, we're not going to necessarily feel exactly what we ideally wanted to have, but I think you're going to see some pretty good compromise that's going to bring it to the next step where you're going to say, wow, okay, you know, I might not get the rumble and I might not get that acronym that Dodge is giving me, but
Yeah.
it's doing some of the dynamic things that you just described that won't exist in any other brand because they've focused on an area that they feel like could help develop some of these feelings because we're still very centric to that driving aspect of the car and we don't want to lose that. So I would say, you know, watch out with this new version. We'll probably have a gas engine of the M3, but we'll also have an electric one. We know the electric one's going to be faster in a lot of areas, but I think you're going to drive the two side by side, and I think that'll be the point where people are going to say, "Wow, this is not bad. That's actually pretty damn good."
Yeah.
And I'm excited about that part of it. That keeps me hopeful that we don't lose it all going towards EV.
Yeah. I mean, I think manual transmission's dead, right? That's
Yeah.
all but confirmed.
Yeah.
But it's good to hear that we're going to preserve that aspect of the driving
And I don't think
experience.
anybody else really is.
Yeah. Well, you know, the other question then is, does BMW develop that from Competition Motorsports, or they just put all all development into it anyway, regardless of what direction motorsports goes in.
I think they put it in there because they want to
Yeah.
have that in their back pocket. It's a distinction, because I think one of the things you just mentioned before, we just talked about with PID, call for what it is. They're soulless transportation. Okay?
What defines soul in a car?
I don't know if you feel anything when you
Yeah.
get in any of these. I mean, they do something. Let me maybe adjust that explanation of soulless. They do something. There's haptics, and there's a sound, and there's a feel good side of it, the tech aspect of it. But look, I sit on my 1198 Ducati, and if I'm at a red light, this thing does vibrations at different RPM levels that don't make any sense, but it feels good. I know where it comes from. I know someone with a funny voweled last name built it, and it makes me feel like that. When you get in some of these electrics, it's like an iPhone, stamped, built, move on. That's what I mean by soulless. Like there's no, I can't totally describe it, but I think you kind of
It's
get.
just silence.
Yeah.
The majority.
I think what you're saying is there's got to be like a human element to it. Like
Yes.
you got to feel that human connection, that it was created by actual human beings.
They're calling that unit that I was just talking about with the newer class, they're calling it the heart.
Mm.
The
That's
soul.
interesting. Yeah.
They're calling it that because they feel like that is what will create some of what I just mentioned with these electric cars and preserve some of that feeling aspect that you don't have, because they recognize it. BMW got it. They're like, look, we can make it drive better. We could do a lot of different things from an engineering standpoint for dynamics, for the chassis and all that. But when you get in the car, there's something you get out of the car and the way the customer interacts with it. And they're steadfast on it, man.
Great to hear.
Yeah, they're not gonna give up, which is good. They're doing it a different way, but I'll take it as opposed to anybody else, because I don't think anyone else is taking that approach. Everyone's saying, let's make a cradle aluminum piece that has two electric motors on the front and the back, or all four wheels with a battery in the middle, and put a swoopy, odd looking body on it, and make a ton of them and make them cheap, and let's get people driving them.
You really think that's going to be the case? I mean, you have manufacturers like, I don't know, Alfa Romeo, for instance.
Yeah.
Maserati. I mean, they built the whole car around the combustion experience. It's
I
all
think
about
that
the
stays
sound.
hybrid.
Is it going to stay?
I think some of it has to. I mean, Ferrari just debuted another 12-cylinder naturally aspirated car.
Thank God for that.
Yeah. They're hanging on, and
Yeah.
listen, call for what it is. It's 844 horsepower.
I mean, that's
God bless. Thank God. Exactly what you said. I think it's happening, and at least I think those brands are the ones that hang on to hybrid, and they're going to do everything possible to try to make sure that they keep something. McLaren. But outside of some of these other brands, I think for us as a mainstay core 4 luxury brand, I don't think anybody else is thinking about those types of feelings that customers get in that sense. They're gonna wow you with screens and colors and sounds and all this other tech, but from an actual haptic feeling from driving a car, I don't think it's gonna be there outside of us. I really don't.
Are we considering Porsche a mainstay brand or no?
I do, but they're at a different level. But I don't know if they've caught up with that. Their focus really is on the dynamic side of it, kind of where we were pre-Newer class. I think they still haven't figured out. They're going to be dialed in on the chassis, dialed in on power, dialed in on this new Taycan, the new one that just lapped the Nürburgring fastest
I saw
electric.
that.
Yeah.
Insane.
I don't think you're going to get in that car and sit and feel anything differently than any Taycan since it came out.
Yeah.
But it's going to drive very differently from a sense of the way the car's positioned and the way the car handles. But I don't think you're going to feel. You're not going to get in that and go, "Oh man, this is kind of like a Carrera S."
No.
3 liter inline, flat six. That's not what you're going to feel.
And I have enthusiast friends that actually bought the Taycan because they thought it was a cool idea, who were closer to your age, won't give away your age, and then sold it within a year.
Really?
Yeah,
What was most
they were
of the
bored of it.
feedback? Oh, really?
They got bored.
So even though it's a Porsche, it's still a boring electric car.
That was kind of their take. Like, it's a one-trick pony. I mean, the acceleration, the torque is all fantastic, but back to your point, there wasn't anything that actually engaged you and connected you back to the machine. It was missing something.
And then talking about that, right? So how do brands keep people loyal there's a lot of differentiation amongst internal combustion engines. You've got people that make 3 cylinders, 4 cylinders, inline 6, V6, V8, V8, twin turbos, all these different things. You go electric, the playing field is incredibly leveled. What do you do to distinguish yourself as a brand to not have a customer look at a Porsche Taycan or look at a BYD and say, hey, listen, they're built out of the same stuff, basically. They do the same exact thing. Why am I gonna pay more for a premium brand electric? How do you keep your distinction amongst your the people that love you as a brand? How do you do that?
I mean, personally, I think it boils down to 2 things. One, there's gonna be intense focus on the aesthetics. So you're literally gonna start hiring, you know, the equivalent of interior decorators to
Design your
craft-
interiors.
You design the interior, right? You're gonna have, you know, new materials that we've never seen before in cars.
Yeah.
That will be a differentiator. Outside design will be a differentiator. So you have the aesthetic component, and I think the other part of that is gonna be technology. And unfortunately, you know, we're creeping ever closer towards fully autonomous cars.
Yes.
Nobody's got a level 5 car yet. Tesla claims it's on the horizon, whether we want it or not. But we have level 3 autonomy now.
Yep.
Level 4 probably isn't that far away. So first manufacturer there is gonna win the prize. That's gonna be a huge differentiator. But, you know, I mean, it's gonna be commoditized. And it's not long after that everybody else is gonna have it. And then what?
Right, so
It's a slippery slope.
It's going to differentiate somebody, whoever comes out, and Tesla, I think, was a lot of post the initial EV craze around it. The next phase and everything that people were excited about with Tesla was that.
Yeah.
It never really fulfilled it completely,
No.
right? Now they're getting sued for it because their stock price was apparently inflated with the selling aspect of saying to people that this will do this and it doesn't.
Full self-driving,
Correct.
which it doesn't do in spite of the name.
But like you said, though, once we're past that, then what do you got? What's left?
What's left?
What's next for EV?
It's
The power will climb, the charging will get faster, hopefully the cars get lighter, hopefully they get more expensive, but interior and exterior design is what's gonna keep people gravitating towards these things.
you know, and are you gonna have cars that just don't have pedals and a steering wheel at a certain point, and they become?
That's gonna be weird.
I'm out, I'm not
You're-
getting it, I'm out.
You're out.
I'm not. I was watching something the other day about how you can, in San Francisco, they've got these autonomous taxis.
Yeah.
Oh,
There's
I've
no
seen
way in
that.
hell, I'm sitting in the back seat of an unmanned car with no steering wheel, it's not happening.
Well, they have like 100 human operators in the background making sure that thing stays on the road.
Oh, really?
So
I
that's-
thought this thing was just operating on AI and it was doing its own thing.
That's the
It
dream.
still does it. It's unless an alert is sent to the operator.
But there's like a-
I've seen like videos of people recording it where it went towards a intersection that was blocked off by police, and the police is telling it to turn around. The car just keeps going forward and forward.
So wait, you're telling me that these cars out there that are these autonomous taxis are still being operated by a human?
Not being operated, they're being monitored, and
Remotely.
they can intervene remotely if they have to.
So basically, someone gets in a car and someone recognizes that that car is now in an active drive.
Yeah.
They're basically waiting to hit enter, stop, or forward or back.
Something like that. But
Wow.
because they have to. Nobody has fully autonomous driving technology yet. It just doesn't exist.
Right. I don't think I care.
I don't care either.
I'm
but-
not into it. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan.
Well, there's no driving anymore. So,
right. Well, what's
so,
the point at that point?
So why do you may as well just be in a capsule.
Well, I guess in hyper-congested cities where you're not moving much anyway, I guess there's some opportunity for somebody to really have value in something like that.
I'm sure it's in handy.
You know, so I would imagine New York City is going to be pretty impossible to drive in within the next 10 years. And if you do, you're going to move at a snail's pace anyway. So once you get into New York, your car automatically goes into auto drive because you're only moving 5 to 10 miles an hour anyway. I guess that's cool. I guess there's a benefit there. But outside of that, you're living out in New Jersey, past Fort Lee, you want to still drive your car, right?
Yeah.
I hope so.
And the majority of people that have these techs in their cars don't even use it. Like all the deliveries that I do,
They don't have
they
it.
order it, But then I show them, they're like, I will never use that.
So do you think it's a bragging thing? Like people
It's
want
just
to
to
talk
have it.
about it? Like at a
Basically,
cocktail
like-
party and just
Yeah.
want to tell people, hey, I've got automatic drive?
Oh yeah.
Or self-parking. It's like, oh, I can
Self-parking.
do that, but I'm never gonna do it.
Makes a lot of sense.
It's like
Wow.
bragging rights.
Yeah. I don't know. This just it's exciting, but very nervous to think about where this is all going. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's very unclear the direction we're heading.
And I think the final component here is, what does it mean for racing? I mean,
Yeah.
where does it take motorsport?
My hope is we develop fuels that'll keep these things running for a long time, because it's evident Formula E is a disaster. It's a good test bed, but no one's paying attention.
Nobody
one's
cares.
watching. You're watching. You might as well watch slot cars or RC cars in the parking lot. That's the equivalent of the excitement. They come around the corner, you hear a whine, and off it goes.
Yeah. It's
I think Porsche is doing a great job with that. They've got a heavy investment into these alternative fuels, and where they're going to be able to continue to drive these internal combustion engines and race these internal, because that's their pedigree. They lose that, I think that's a big issue.
yeah. So they are developing syn fuels.
Yeah.
It's incredibly expensive right now.
Yep.
But that's probably a great recipe for keeping internal combustion engines going for an indefinite period of time, even after EVs dominate
There's still
the
an
landscape.
opportunity with that, and I think that's the thing, right? Like I feel like a lot happens so fast with trying to catch up to Tesla, and I feel like there's still opportunity from an internal combustion engine, turbo, hybrid, electrification with turbos. There's so many things. We can keep this thing alive for a little while longer, but it was driven by the fact that government says, hey, this is the direction you're going in. We're going to throw money at it, and people chase money, and that's what's happened. But I think there's still so much left in an internal combustion engine. Then you've got hydrogen, which could still give us some feel and some rumble. There's still an explosion happening in there.
BMW was first to the party with it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
1988. I remember the E32 750. They converted to run fully hydrogen.
The problem is I don't know how much R&D is going to live within that for the time. I mean, we're gonna have our inline six. This inline six that we've got is going to carry us probably for the next 10 years. We're not going to make another version of it.
Hopefully.
Right? I hope, right? But I don't know if there's going to be new, from scratch, internal combustion engines coming out from any manufacturer past the next 5 years.
I mean, Aston Martin said they're going all in on a V12 for the next generation of cars.
Really?
They their CEO did a full 180 and said, forget the old
Lance
EV
Stroll,
future, we're
good
going
man.
V12.
Good man.
Yeah, it's good to hear.
Man.
Yeah.
Let's see, how did they get away with it though, from the CAF regulations and all that?
They're a small niche manufacturer, right? So when they make 1,000 cars a year, what are they really paying for that? I mean, they're going to pay a carbon penalty tax,
Right.
but they can purchase those credits.
And
That's
pass it
wonderful.
along to the customer.
And pass it along to the customer, because
Right.
the customer says, we don't care, we're going to pay $1 million for one of those cars.
Yeah.
And so, that kind of raises the other question of, will any enthusiast in the future be able to actually afford an ICE car? Or are they just going to be, V12, Ferrari, Aston Martins, Lamborghinis, and that's it?
At some point, probably. I mean, maybe. I mean, what restrictions then come from being able to maintain them? What garages will have? I mean, oil will probably be one of the dirtiest words used in the English
Yeah.
language one day. Where do you store it? Where do you keep it? Where do you buy it? I mean, all that, it's going to change. I don't know if people will be able to, in the long term, keep some of these things alive. It's going to be tough. And I think regulation will cause a lot of that.
Do you think where we stand right now, there's just no turning back? Like, we're going to go EV no matter what?
I think we're going towards alternatives. I don't think EV is the only one, and I think we're going to start to see more diversification away from just EV, and that's going to happen a lot quicker than most people think. Because I think the reality is the acceptance of all EV, the infrastructure's not there. It's not going to happen. We can't. It's not possible. No one tomorrow 320 million people can't all of a sudden drive an EV in this country. It's not going to happen. We can't power AC units in the tri-state area during a heat wave week, let alone charge our cars all at the same time. It's just not going to happen.
And the charger itself is tech. Like, how many times like people tell us that it's broken down or it doesn't work when they get
Don't
there?
get me started, dude. I'm almost getting into fist fights with people with Hyundai Ioniqs about charging. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And in
Yeah.
fairness to everybody, it sucks. There's only a few around. The public ones are the ones that you can get the fastest charging, and they're just not available because there is a good amount of people out there driving them now, but half of them don't work.
Yeah, who's actually like maintaining these things?
And there's no one there.
There's
I got
nobody
news.
there.
Every time I've ever been to an Electrify America charger in this area, I've never seen a maintenance person on the spot looking at these. They are all remote. They're all, they just thought it's all software. Well, I got news for you. It's not all software. Some of these screens stop responding to touch. Sometimes the cable gets run over by somebody and the head on the cable won't go into the plug anymore. Like there's physical things that need to be addressed by someone being there, and that's not happening.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So where do we charge? That's the other part of it. I think that's the biggest inhibitor is the people feeling confident about being able to get this thing charged in a quick manner, and we just don't have this in this country, and we're not going to have it anytime soon.
Yeah, I think, the perfect equation for most people is 500 miles of range,
Yep.
charge time in under 5 minutes, and you have,
Even 10
Full
minutes
charge
would be
under
good.
5 minutes?
like let's get to 80%, right?
Okay, I'm with
You
you.
go from 20 to 80 in under 5 minutes. I think most people would probably
Be okay with that.
be okay with
I
that.
agree with you.
They would accept that as a desirable trade-off.
Yeah, with that kind of range, if you think about it, at 80%, you do the math, you got it, 300 and change miles on a charge, you're okay. You do the rest at home or wherever at office, something to that effect,
But it still doesn't solve the last part of that equation, which is the infrastructure.
right?
And you pull up, you get to a charger, is it gonna work? Is
Yeah.
it gonna function correctly? Are you gonna be waiting in a line? And is somebody actually like on the hook for maintaining these things so that you can guarantee, quick charging times?
When we start to see one bay at every gas station in America have a port of some sort, or 2 or 4, different conversation,
Different conversation.
100%.
Have
And
you
I think
seen-
that's the differentiation, like Elon went infrastructure first.
Yeah,
He built the network because he
Mhm.
wanted to be able to support it. And yes, there are pain points for even those customers, but we went full force throughout the industry. Let's build a ton of these things, but then where are we gonna connect?
Yeah.
yeah.
So if we shift there, I think that's what, so I think my prediction, and I'm no economist, but I think what happens is you get a slowdown of appetite of EV, which we're seeing obviously. I think you're gonna see a repivoting of automotive manufacturers doing more things with hybrid and much slower pace on bringing to market more of these EVs. And then someone will start to jump in when they see that tipping point where we're getting close to 10% EV, and you see a Shell or a BP or an Exxon throw 1 or 2 bays in their gas stations to be EV.
I haven't seen a single one yet.
Not yet, but they're talking about it,
They
and it's
gotta
happening
talk
in the UK, it's happening with a lot of BP, it's happening with those companies.
Yeah,
They're doing it.
Shell's
doing
into
it too.
renewable energy.
Yeah.
I mean, you just came back from Europe. Did you see it over there?
No. In Italy, I don't think anybody cares about driving an EV. I think I saw, in the entire time I was there, I did see Teslas, not an abundance of them, but I saw one BMW EV, and it's not one that we even get here. It's the iX3.
Oh, I've read about that.
Current body style,
Oh.
wild, with all these different types of aero add-ons to the front bumper, rear bumper. It looked crazy. It was in the middle of Rome, and I'm like, wow, that thing looks crazy standing there, because we don't get them here. It's like an Albatross, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but not a ton. Not a ton, but I think Italians are definitely gonna be the last to jump on EV. I mean, it's probably gasoline running in their veins at this point.
Yeah.
They're not gonna let that go anytime soon.
Yeah.
But the rest of the world, there are restrictions in a lot of areas. Like Rome doesn't have the EV restriction or the penalty for tax for driving into the city within city limits. Like Paris does, London does. Those they tax you once you get into those areas
Oh yeah,
at a rate because you're driving a car that's not ICE. I'm sorry, not an EV.
right.
It's a long topic, man. A lot of tentacles on it. That's going to be a long time before we.
And most people that want or are getting these EVs are getting it because of the incentives, free charging, all
Yeah.
that, and that's ending for us too, like with the i4s.
Yeah.
Well, that's that. You know, I think about that too, right? Like, you hit on a great point. So when these things stop getting $10,000, $7,000 of money thrown at them, how many people really buy them? And then you've got the tax part of it. Listen, at some point, New Jersey's going to pull the plug on making it tax free. I mean, you've got certain countries that Sweden and those areas, they're tapping out on the incentives. They're tapped out on the free tax. Now it's just getting treated like every other car. And they're seeing a significant slowdown in the take rates on these things. So then what happens here? You know, like it's.
Yeah, is there a point where consumers just flat out refuse it and say it's too expensive, it's too inconvenient, and if I'm forced to pick, I'd rather just buy a used car than buy a new EV?
I think in America, the land of choice, I think people here will push back, and they already are.
Yeah.
And I think they're already telling us, I'm not interested. And if they are, it better be something that's so ridiculous and inexpensive, then they'll take it as a second or a third option car. But
I mean, didn't GM already have that? They had the Bolt. It was like the perfect, inexpensive EV that it had decent range. It wasn't a terrible car.
tons of recalls, they can't fix.
Yeah, I mean,
battery
besides the fact you
fires.
caught on fire, lit your house on fire.
You can drive one for $25,000, but guess what? You might kill yourself in a fire.
That's the
Can't be-
risk you gotta take.
Right. That you can't extinguish, by the way. That's a whole other thing.
Oh yeah.
Oh, right. We didn't even touch on that. You know,
Safety.
and then you extinguish it and it reignites itself again. And it's just this reoccurring nightmare.
It's not, there's nothing you can do. There's literally nothing you can do. And we're dealing with that now in our world from automotive at the dealer level. Like, where are we gonna store these old batteries? Who's gonna take them back? BMW doesn't even want them.
So you're telling us there's no plan, even from a manufacturer like BMW, to recycle these batteries?
They have ideas and there's some pathway towards it, but it isn't exactly defined. But you need, at our level, you need to know where you're gonna put them. You can't just put them in a shed, you can't just keep them outside. They can blow up, they can get hot.
That's
One
insane.
leaks. And if there's no take on them when they're done, we will start to replace some of these batteries in the next 4 to 5 years. And we're gonna have to figure out where we're gonna put them.
Yeah. I mean,
Store them.
you're not even supposed to throw out the little 9-volt alkaline batteries in the garbage. You're supposed to recycle those.
Exactly
Or even
right.
a little-
Right.
The little cell batteries.
Yeah,
The little
right?
cell batteries.
Yeah.
Buttons, yeah.
Yeah, you're supposed to recycle those.
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
What else we got to talk about?
I think it's going to be next episode because we've barely touched on this.
Oh my God, this is
Yeah.
like a 5-hour conversation.
Yeah,
at
we
minimum.
can talk for days.